My name is Joe Reingold, and I'm interviewing Stuart Rosenfield, and today is March 4th, 2019. Hello there, Stuart. Good evening.
Hi.
Stuart, tell us a little bit about your family, your grandparents and your parents that you know of and that you remember.
Sure. Well, my family, both sides of my family came from Russia and Lithuania. They arrived here in the early 1900s. My grandfather's family, he was born in 1903, and he was actually born in Russia and came over here on my mother's side. And on my father's side, my grandfather came over here from, we think, Lithuania. That's where my grandmother was from, and they went to England, and then they eventually arrived here. My name really isn't Rosenfield. It's we're not really sure what it is, so we're not related to really a lot of Rosenfields in the area. But he was my grandmother's maiden name was Rosenberg, and when they came in through Philadelphia, which is where everybody settled, he asked him what his name was, and he couldn't. The guy in charge, whoever was doing the customs, couldn't understand him. So he asked my grandmother what her name was, and she says Rosenberg, and he says, "Your name is Rosenfield." So that's how we became Rosenfields.
Close enough.
So my parents, Martin and Estelle, were both born in Philadelphia, as was I, in 1960. And my dad worked for Pep Boys and was one of the early buyers for Pep Boys, Manny, Mo, and Jack. And my mom was in the secretarial pool. So my dad worked for Jack and my mom worked for Mo. And they met at work. And so they met and were married in 1951. And then my dad got when Pep Boys came down to Texas, my dad was the first buyer to come down with them and came down with Jack's son. And they started Pep Boys down here in Dallas. And so they came here in 1961. I was 10 months old, and with my older sister. And that's when we became Dallasites at 61. My parents immediately got involved with the Jewish community primarily through Sheriff Israel. So we were Sheriff's members since the early 60s, and that's where I was bar mitzvahed and married later on.
Very good. What neighborhood did you live in as a child, and what did you like to do when you were growing up in elementary school?
So when we moved down from Philadelphia, we moved in the W.T. White High School area around North Haven, and so we lived around there. And then in '72, we moved to the Hillcrest High School area. So my sister went to W.T. White, and I went to Hillcrest. We moved to be more near the JCC. I was very involved with baseball. I played baseball at the JCC, and at that time we called it the DJHS Community Center. And so we were very involved there. My mom was involved in ORT, and my dad played cards with his friends. So we had a Jewish community, and primarily most of the friends that they had belonged to Sheriff Israel. But I was very involved in JCC sports, and primarily baseball, and then did more sports when I was involved with BBYO. And did all the other sports involved with BBYO. So we were very active that way. And I was involved, of course, with a lot with BBYO, a little bit with USY through Sheriff Israel.
I was going to ask if any other things were happening when you were a teenager. What were your interests at that point when you were a little bit older, before college?
So I was very involved with a couple things. I played the violin since I was in second grade, so I played all through high school, and really was involved. Especially when at BBYO. So I was very active in BBYO. My chapter, I was in Brandeis AZA, and was most of the leadership roles through there, and really my social life revolved around that, and really enjoyed that time in BBYO.
Very good. Did you have any outside interests besides the Jewish community at that point?
Not really. I had a part-time job at that time, Eckerd Drugs. And I worked in my dad's warehouse, but really didn't do much outside of BBYO was probably my biggest thing. And then the other thing I also was Boy Scouts. So I'm an Eagle Scout. Was in the troop out of Temple Emmanuel, 729, and so worked my way through Eagle Scout and became an Eagle Scout at 15, and then kind of phased out of that and really focused on the BBYO aspect of things.
Very good. So now we're at high school level. Did you choose to go on to college?
Yes. Pretty much everybody I knew at Hillcrest went to UT, University of Texas, and so that was pretty much a no-brainer. I really only applied there, got in.
In Austin?
in Austin, and then joined AE Pi in the fraternity, and which was frankly most of my friends from Brandeis joined AE Pi, so we all joined together, and really made a difference in AE Pi in that chapter. So I knew a lot of guys, and at UT I was very active in other organizations besides AE Pi. I was a Cactus Good Fellow and did several leadership organizations. I was on the Council of Natural Sciences and did several other things, got really involved, and I went to school as well. So
You had time for class?
had time for class. So originally pre-med, but transitioned when I figured that wasn't for me, and got a degree in computer science. So did graduate in 4 years, and then got a job with Northern Telecom in telecommunications right out of college.
Very good. Can you think of a memorable project or something that you worked on during college to lend itself to the opportunity that you had after college?
I would probably say the leadership positions that I had in API and also the Natural Sciences Council, which is at the time student government, and also leadership in the ACM, which was the computer science thing. I got to meet different people from different walks of life in different areas of the country. You know, Hillcrest is pretty much North Dallas, a lot of Jewish area, so it's really much same people. And then when I got to UT, of course, I met a lot of other people and from different areas, and really I think that prepared me for going out into the business world, where I met even more people who weren't necessarily like me growing up in North Dallas.
Right. Well, you're basically a native, so how has the city changed since you've been here, and also the Jewish community changed?
So when we moved here in '61, and my parents, of course, joined a synagogue, there was really only three choices. There was Tiferet if you were Orthodox, Shereth Israel if you were conservative, and Temple Emmanuel if you were Reform. And pretty much everybody lived, or all the Jews lived in 75230 or 229, around that area, around the JCC and a little bit south. And we were just on the outskirts of that, where we lived in the W.T. White district. It was a smaller community. There was maybe 25,000 people that lived here. And of course, you know, there was the JCC, but everybody pretty much lived in the same area. As the 70s happened and more people moved in, I noticed more friends of mine were from New York City, Brooklyn, that area. And they lived somewhat in our area, but a lot of them moved north of LBJ, which really wasn't built until '72, but they lived in Richardson. And so they went to Richardson High School and places like that. And they were probably about 10 years younger than my parents. But there was a huge influx of people from the east, up North New York and places like that, that came here in the 70s. So you had the people who'd come here in the 60s and 50s and earlier, and then you had the newer people that came in from New York. So, and then as it grew, it was pretty much that way until college, but certainly after college, people started moving north to Richardson and Plano. Nobody ever heard of Plano where I live now. Nobody ever heard of Plano in high school. There was one kid that lived in Plano, and nobody would go out for BBYO because it was too far out.
It's too far.
But what I've seen is obviously the Jewish community has significantly grown to well over 50,000 people, and it's grown north. So it's not just 75230, the zip code, it's several other zip codes. And instead of only having three choices of where to go to synagogue or religious school or whatever, you know, there's 25 or more. And so there's lots of choices today. And even if you're conservative or reform, there's places. What we did was Andy and I got married at Shereth Israel. And she belonged to Temple Emmanuel, and I belonged to Shereth. And we did get married at Shereth because we were both conservative. But as time grew on, as we had kids, and we moved to Plano, we joined Anshe Torah when it started in 91, in 99. So we joined it because it was closer to where we lived, and we could become more active. And one of the things that Andy and I are I think real good at is we become very active in the organizations that we belong to. And so if we were going to join a synagogue, we didn't want to join a synagogue that was 30 minutes away. So now we go to Anshe Torah, which is 6. And so it's much more easy to be active in that community, in that Jewish community. And like I said, with my kids' schools and everything like that, is really our place was in North Plano, North Dallas area.
Besides location, what else have you gotten out of your membership at Anshe Torah?
So at Anshe, like I said, we were one of the founding members, and I was on the exec board for about 6 years. I was on the board. I was president of the men's club, and then became on the board, and then became executive vice president. Sometime later. So one of the things certainly I've gotten out of it is, when growing up at Sheriff, you had no idea there was these people that you saw on pictures on the wall, and you saw who were presidents and on the board, but you had no idea as a kid what it's like to run a synagogue. You just went to religious school, and that's pretty much all you saw. Being on the board of Anshe Torah, you can see how a synagogue runs and all the mechanics and all the finances and all the other issues that are going on in a synagogue that really the average congregant doesn't see. So the other thing that I'm involved with, which I enjoy, is I'm in Kol Rina, which is the a cappella men's group. And so I was one of the founding members of that, and we've been singing now for almost 15 years. And we do bar mitzvahs and weddings and things like that. So that's a lot of fun too. I think, and of course, I kid Andy is through Sisterhood and some other activities, and my boys through the religious school at Anshe Torah. Really, it's become a big part of our life, for the past 20 years.
So back up a little bit and tell us how you met your wife and the kind of life that you've built here.
So when I got out of college, I worked in computer science, and I've been in telecommunications for over 35 years. So I started at Northern Telecom, was a programmer, but I know I wanted to get my MBA. And so when I was once again, I got involved in the Jewish Singles Group. This was before the internet and Match.com and JDate and all that. So we actually met people and had to call dates and things like that on the phone.
Face to face.
Face to face. So I was involved with the Jewish Singles Group, and actually I was on the leadership committee of the Jewish Singles Group and helped out the people there and programs. So one of the programs was an ice skating rink and program, and so I met Andy Eisencraft at the time. So she was just finishing up her MBA at the University of Dallas, and I was just starting my MBA at the University of Dallas, and so I basically asked if I could borrow her notes. So the funny thing is I never really used her notes, but I married her anyway. So we got married in '85, and but she was also involved in the Jewish Singles Group as well, planning programs and things like that. So. That's one of the things that I admired about Andy is that she, like when we get an organization, we join it, we become leaders and become active and try to make that organization better. So I saw that very similar to what I was doing, and so we continue to that day. But yeah, so I met at a Jewish Singles Group.
That's great.
There you go.
And how has your family grown?
So we have 3 boys. Adam, who was born in 1988, Evan in 91, and Daniel in 95. And so Adam went to the University of North Texas and now lives in Austin. And Evan went to UT Austin and lives in DC. And then Daniel was an ROTC and went to Texas A&M and is now a lieutenant in the Air Force in Rapid City, South Dakota. So they've all turned out real well. We'll see what happens after this. No one's married yet, no grandkids yet. Okay. So we'll see.
Do you get to visit them all over the place?
Yeah, not as often as we like, but being that they're single, they're just trying their careers or getting started. So we do see each other as often as we can.
Okay. Tell us about a couple of projects or things that you're proud of, work-related, that you've done through the years.
So, I would probably say, in a couple of jobs that I've had, I've created the position I've been in product management and product marketing for most of my adult life, and what that involves is really expanding products, creating products, and promoting products. At Ericsson, I started the product marketing group, which became a model for the international Ericsson that you know today. When I started with Ericsson, they were a small telecommunications company from Sweden. Nobody knew who they were, just when wireless was getting started. And nobody had a cell phone. Very few people, only the technicians had them. And so I was the leader. I was the first one that started the product marketing group at Ericsson North America, which of course now is a behemoth in the telecommunications industry. And then I would say I switched to product management for a company called Stuarts, and I added some product lines there that they still have today, even 10, 15 years later, that added a lot of revenue. So, I think making a difference in the organizations that I belong to, and I've even changed careers. Frankly, I'm now in building products for a company called Fortress. But I've been in wireless, I've been in transmission, I've been in cell phone testing, I've been in even phones for jails and prisons at Securus. That was interesting. So I went to jail actually to make money. So that's that. But that's interesting. So I've been in different industries, different companies, but I've left a mark on them, and in a good way. And so I think I'm proud of that.
Sounds wonderful. So how did you get involved with this organization, the Dallas Jewish Historical Society?
So I got a call from Cindy Moskowitz, who said, hey, we have this organization, and we'd like you to become a board member. And didn't quite know about it, but she told me about it, and knowing me, of course, I said, oh, become active with an organization. What a good thing to do. So I became a board member, and then after a couple of years, I moved up to the exec board, and was a vice president with Jim Schwartz. And then after a bunch of cajoling, he convinced me after his term to become president. So I've been the president for 3 years, and we've seen it grow. We've had some great success with fundraising, and the board has changed for the better, and the office is running much better, and we've got really a great organization that's really on the cusp of going something really big. So we've had a good time, and I've been on it for now almost 10 years.
Wow, that's a long time. Can you think of somebody along the way who was your role model or is your role model?
I don't think there's just one person. I've had a lot of role models and mentors. Some obviously, my dad from a moral perspective, and seeing him every day and seeing what he did. He never went to college. In fact, both my mom and dad never went to college, so we were the first ones. But he had a high IQ and was very smart. Then he had street smarts, and so he was very creative, and really I learned a lot from him. Certainly growing up, and then I think as my professional career, I really picked out either bosses or people who were in a different group, who I admired, who I said, what, they're doing something right. And so I tried to emulate what they were doing and how they acted and how they succeeded. And then in my nonprofit volunteer organizations, whether they be in Boy Scouts or I'm a soccer referee. I've been a soccer referee now for 17 years. So I obviously look at soccer mentors and scouters, and also people at Anshai Torah or some other people who were successful or just did things right and had something that maybe I said, I could learn from them. Mm-hmm. So I've really had different mentors along the way in different organizations, and really any place that I try to go to, I try to find one or two people who I can say, hey, because I'm never the smartest guy in the room, so I always try to find the person who's the smartest in the room. So I try to learn from them. And even from my wife and kids. I try to learn from them. My kids may be younger than I am, but they've had different experiences, and so if they've had an interesting experience that maybe I didn't, I'd say, that's interesting the way they handle it. So I really try to learn from everybody.
That's a great attitude. So what are you the most proud of, if you can pinpoint something?
Probably the most proud of is, I've tried to make a difference in all the organizations that I've been in. I've been in many. I was on the diversity committee for the city of Plano. I've been in a scout leader for 20 years. I've obviously been in the historical society, Anshe Torah, and probably some I'm probably forgetting. BYO as a kid, and in my troop in Boy Scouts and API, and so what I've tried to do is make a difference, and not just become a member of an organization. Rarely did I become a member of an organization and I was just a member. I usually went up in the organization as a leader, or did some project or some event that people said, wow, that was a great thing. So there was only maybe one or two organizations I could think of, and those were early in college, where I joined them, and then after 2 weeks I said, nah, this isn't for me. But generally, any organization that I've been in, I've made a difference. Maybe not for 20 years, but certainly for the time I was in, and maybe 2-3 years afterwards, I set an example for the next person to come in and tried to grow that organization and make it better than when I came in.
Can't ask for more than that. Is there anything you can think of that you'd like to add to the interview?
I think I've learned, when I grew up, and my dad never had a resume. So he basically worked for Pep Boys, and then he worked for another company. So for his entire 50-year career, he worked for 2 companies. I worked for 2 companies in probably 2.5 years. So I've worked for probably 10 companies so far. I counted it up. I have over 30 bosses that I've had over those years. But what I've learned, I originally thought that I would plan my life out. Everything was going to go according to plan. And I'd work for 1, maybe 2 companies over the years, and then I'd be done. And my kids would all live here, and we'd all be great. And what I've learned is that life quite doesn't usually work that way. So I changed majors in college. I've changed jobs, almost a dozen times, sometimes not of my own accord, through layoffs and things like that, which I never even knew that term until I got into the real world. And my kids are in different parts of the country. So I learned that life is a journey, that you can't, it's not always a straight angle, although we'd like it to be. So what I've done is I've tried to adapt to the situations, and I think that's really where I've been the most successful, is my adaptability to the situation. Sometimes we can't control what we want to control. We think we control everything, but sometimes we can't. So I think my ability to adapt has really helped me over the years, through when we have adversity or issues like that. In fact, one of the things I've also done is I've been in job transition so often that I've actually given talks and written about how to find a job and things like that. So try to give back, and that's the other thing I've tried to impart on my kids. And the good news is that my kids have a great moral compass, and they also have empathy for other people. So I think that's a success as well. And to give back to the community and give back to others, because you'll get that many times over.
Thank you. This has been a delight. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.